Okay, so
All right, well set.
go. Yep.
All right, well, welcome. This is the information session for a few of BES's administrative rule updates regarding sewer connections and lateral repairs in the right-of-way. My name is Glenn Laub. I'm with BES Code Rules and Manuals team, and I'm joined with Margaret Russell from BES's UCUR permitting team, Colleen Harold with Standards and Practices, and Ivy Dunlap, also with Code Rules and Manuals. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We'd like to request that you keep the mics muted during the presentation and hold off on any questions until after the presentation. It shouldn't take that long. There's be plenty of time to get into questions, but feel free to comment in the chat at any time, but just address those later on. I'm just going to ask Eric, are you familiar with the Zoom controls?
Yes, sir, I am, Glenn.
All right, cool. Sorry, I think that's the only. Is there anybody else that joined, Ivy?
No, nobody else has joined.
All right, cool. All right, so with that, we're just gonna jump right into it. So just a quick heads up on what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be covering 3 different rules. I'm going to briefly describe what's being updated and why, sort of collectively, and then we'll dive into the rule-specific updates later in the presentation. So what is being updated? We're updating 3 existing administrative rules under the authority of BES. The first rule is what we refer to as ENB-4.17, and this is regarding sewer connections and lateral repairs. Permitting by BES. These are policies and guidance for new sewer connections and repairs to existing sewer laterals in the public right-of-way. We're going to be talking about updates to Administrative Rule ENB-4.33, which is the use of cured in place piping, lining repairs, and privately maintained pipe in the public right-of-way. So this rule provides its guidance and policies specific to CIPP repairs, private lines and laterals in the public right-of-way. And then we're going to touch on some targeted updates to ENB-4.15, which is our enforcement program rules. Just a quick heads up that we're not talking about updates to city code. So where code provides, let's say, the regulatory authority to do something is authorized by the city charter, we're talking about administrative rules here, which are intended to provide guidance and details and decision-making criteria to facilitate the implementation of code. So as it relates to code, the rules that we're going to be talking about today, the authority comes from what we call City Code Chapter 1732, which is our public utilities code. So why are updates necessary? So ENB-4.17 has been adopted and in place for several years, but it hasn't seen any major updates. So the updates are going to focus on removing obsolete information, going to update references to applicable city design and construction standards, and overall just clarify policies and protocols regarding reviewing, issuing, and approving connection and repair permits, or UCUR permits. Excuse me. ENB-4.33. These updates are primarily, the primary driver of this is to establish standards that will allow BES to consider CIPP products with alternatives to NSEALs. So just to be clear, we're not removing the update requiring NSEALs. They are still required, but the rule does need an update to allow BES to consider alternative to NSEALs. And then since the rules being updated anyways, we're going to use this opportunity to provide clarity and guidance regarding CIPP line permit process and protocols. And lastly, the enforcement program rules, ENB-4.15, just some targeted updates for to provide consistent terminology to align the rule with some of the enforcement tools that BES, the enforcement program uses, but there's not a comprehensive update. It's more just targeted updates. So to kick things off, we're going to summarize updates to ENB 4.17. Before we get going, I think it's important to note what's not changing. These updates do not add or create any new city policy, and the rules do not require permits for activities that are not already subject to this rule. So having said that, if you're familiar with the rule, when you look at the updated version, it's going to look and feel very different when compared to the existing rule, but that's largely due to a comprehensive reorganization, which we're going to speak to later in the presentation. So what is ENB 4.17? This is an existing administrative rule that provides policies and protocols and guidance for permitting sewer connections and laterals in the public right-of-way. You can kind of think of this as sort of a mini manual that's specific to connecting laterals, repairing laterals to the public sewer system. The permits associated with this rule include lateral connections, or known as UC permits, and lateral repair permits, which we're calling UR permits. Just to be clear, we're not talking about this rule does not relate to public works permits, which involve much more complex activities such as public sewer main extensions and stormwater facilities. These are specifically rules that talk about lateral connections in the public right-of-way here. So getting into 4.17 here, the overall theme of the update is to improve the rules' usability, transparency, and predictability. If you're familiar with the rule, it can be challenging to find information because all the information in the rule really is embedded in one of two long bulleted lists that don't follow any kind of sequential ordering. So the updates attempt to address this by grouping related policies and listing them in a chronological order that generally follows the overall construction and permitting processes. So one standout thing is the rule now includes a table of contents so you can find what you're looking for and hopefully find answers quickly to answer questions like, what type of activities trigger a UR permit versus a UC permit? What kind of submittal requirements or qualifications are expected from the sewer contractor and such. Rule updates also remove a lot of outdated policy, which includes just removing work that was never really permitted under or intended to be permitted under this rule, such as sewer extensions, work on private property, which is subject to plumbing code, and decommissioning of septic, which I think is permitted by BDS and also requires some level of DEQ. And lastly, we're updating references to current city design construction standards, such as the sewer drainage facilities design manual and the standard construction specifications. The rule provides updates and clarification regarding activities and locations that are subject to UC and UR permits. So here's some examples of what activities trigger a utility connection permit. So we're connecting a public sewer, connecting to a public sewer. So that can be connecting to an existing public branch. So that's one that takes it to the curb. So the UC permit might involve just connecting the private side to the public side. So this little segment here, or if there isn't an existing branch, it would take it from the property line all the way to the public main. UC permits are also issued to install cleanouts citywide. If you're relocating a line, they're issued for abandoning and capping laterals and installation of standard manholes. Margaret, is there anything you want to add?
Lynn, you did a fabulous job. Perfect.
All right, cool, thanks. So similar to the UC permits, the updated rule also clarifies activities that are subject to UR permitting. So these are repair permits. UR permits typically affect a very small area of the right-of-way, which is generally between the curb and the property line, right in this area right here. But while they typically affect a small area within the public right of way, determining the limits of that area can be difficult. So the updated rule provides guidance to help determine that. I should back up one slide here. So what we're talking about here is the privately maintained portion of the public right of way. So this is the area that's still within the right of way, but it's not the responsibility of the city. It's the responsibility of the property owner. And determining that can be difficult at times depending on the site conditions. So what the rule does is provide some guidelines to help determine those areas. So again, the city's maintenance area is described in chapter 1732. And what we're doing is we're not changing or altering any of the maintenance responsibilities that are reflected in code. We're just providing guidance on determining that privately maintained portion of the right of way. So just to summarize here, for paved roadways, which also includes alleys, we're talking about the face or edge of pavement to the property line. If you're in a situation where there's more than one curb, like a public stormwater facility, then it's the face of curb that's closest to the property line. Unpaved streets, including unpaved alleys, this is going to be the area from the property line to the edge of the 20-foot wide city maintenance area, and that's centered in the public right of way. And then for public sewer easements, we're talking about the area from the Y or the T connection at the public sewer main to the edge of the public sewer easement. And I think I got that, but Mark, I just want to ask one more time here. Is there anything you want to add? Because this was a pretty good update here.
Glenn, I have nothing to add.
All right, then we'll move on. The URCU, I'm sorry, Margaret, the UCR permitting team really does strive to issue permits same day, but there are going to be situations or conditions that may cause a delay or withholding of the permit. That's not super clear in the rule. So the rule update again, it's just providing clarity and outlining some situations where BES may require a BOTMO, also, oh my gosh, Margaret.
The Bureau of Maintenance?
Bureau of Maintenance, Environmental Services Division of Maintenance Operations.
Of PBOT.
You pick the acronym and we may require them to do the connection. And some of the situations include if it's involves a clay pipe, 15 inches or larger in diameter, mains that are 36 inches in diameter or larger, or brick mains. So that could be a situation where we're going to request PBOT to do the connection. And also the updates provide examples of conditions that may impact that same day issuance. So if the sewer contractor is proposing a deep riser connection or inside drop, those can delay it because it might require the permitting team to check in with other teams, or in the case of like an angled lateral, that might be subject to a design variance, or something that may withhold the permit for a while is to resolve non-conforming sewer issues. So the rule updates just, again, these aren't new things, but I don't think it's clear. Maybe the expectation was that permits would be issued same day. So we're just making it clear that if you have some of these situations, you can expect it to take maybe a little longer, maybe not.
Yes, Glenn. So you did a great job with that, and that the UC permits may not be able to be issued on the same day if there's difficult site conditions. And with the URs, they usually are issued for the same day. However, non-conforming sewer issues will cause we cannot issue UR permits for non-conforming sewer situations. Thanks, Glenn.
Perfect. Thanks, Margaret. Excuse me. The rule updates what is currently table 2 in the existing rule. It actually puts the information in the existing rule into a table format. It doesn't even have a format. It's just a bunch of information. It makes it really challenging to read and interpret. So we've cleaned that up. The table now is just to clarify lateral domain connection types. This table really just expands and clarifies a similar table in the sewer design manual. That's all there's to say about that. The updated rule provides guidance on what to do when relocating and abandoning sewer lines. So for private sewer laterals, you're gonna be required to put in watertight plugs or caps on the base of curb. That's for sewer laterals on a private sewer lines. Plugs and caps are going to be installed on the upstream and downstream ends of the private line. So this guidance is new to the rule, but it reflects existing code requirements and construction standards and practices, but it was added to the rule to provide clarity. ENB-4.17 now includes a typical detail for installing storm and SANY connections, and the intent of having this in the rule is really just to facilitate on-site conversations between the contractor and the inspectors. Picture says 1,000 words, and it's easy to point to a picture and describe what's going on than trying to describe it based on a condition in the rule. And lastly, the rule updates make it clear that UC and UR permittings are subject to enforcement. This is not new. Enforcement of UC and UR permits is and has always been authorized under Chapter 1732 of City Code. It's just that the rule improves transparency regarding the types of actions that may cause enforcements, and those enforcements are conducted through our environmental compliance division. And there's another rule, it's actually a rule we're going to be talking about later in the presentation, that describes the procedures for enforcement, and that's ENB-4.17. So some examples of violations that might occur: failing to get a permit, failing to comply with the description of work, so going above and beyond what was authorized in the permit, not meeting conditions of the permit, and so forth. So with that, I'm going to switch gears now, and we're going to talk about our CIPP rule, which is Administrative Rule ENB-433. So ENB-433 is our cured in place pipe lining repairs and a privately maintained pipe in the public right of way, which might be the longest title of any admin rule we're going to talk about. So before we get into it, like the previous rule we talked about, ENB-4.17, and if you're familiar with this rule, 433, you'll notice that the look and feel of the rule is quite different than the existing one, but that's largely due to just another comprehensive reorganization, trying to group related policies and kind of put it in a sequential order, a logical order that makes sense for staff and for the customers. So let's get to it here. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but for anyone that's not familiar with cured in place pipe lining repairs, this is a repair method that involves inserting a flexible liner into the existing failing pipe, or host pipe as we'll call it, and curing the liner to create a rigid, smooth surface that restores the old pipe to an almost new condition. Administrative Rule ENB-433 provides the criteria, guidance, and protocols for using CIPP lining to repair privately maintained pipe in the public right of way. So this is the primary driver for the updates. I'll start this part of the presentation by saying that it's not the intent of the city to preclude the use of viable, effective, or equivalent materials. However, staff implementing this rule have found that the existing language for NCL requirements, they found it to be too restrictive, and that it didn't allow BES to consider equivalent alternatives. So that is the primary driver for this update, and it's to reconcile an inequity regarding CIPP NCL requirements. So to address this, the updated rule now includes criteria that BES will use to review products that do not have or require NCL, so basically alternatives to the NCL. So within the rule, you'll find that there are submittal requirements. It's suggested that you provide as much information as you can, and need the methods of the liner system to expand and tightly conform to that host pipe. means and methods for product curing and data for shrinkage and annular space to develop. That information's got to demonstrate that the lining system can ultimately withstand an external hydrostatic pressure of 7.25 psi. That submittal goes to BES standards and practices for review and approval, and generally their decisions are based on the product's demonstrated ability to create a watertight repair and prevent inflow and infiltration of groundwater and migration of fine aggregates. So that's what was driving the updates to this, was to add this policy into it, that since the rule was open and being updated, we took the opportunity to clean it up. So, and make that, by cleaning it up, it's just make it more user-friendly for customers and staff. And that was accomplished by simplifying language to be more concise. There was a lot of redundancy in the rule, so we've done our best to remove that. We've also consolidated policies and guidance under related subject matter. It was kind of difficult to follow in the current rule. And similar to 417, we organize this rule in a sort of a logical, chronological order that follows the construction and permitting processes. So you'll see some parallels between the two rules and how they work together. So this is in that same vein of clarifying the existing rule can be a little difficult to navigate and is often unclear as to what needs to be done, who is responsible for looking at it, and to what standards. And so we've tried to do that. Basically, this rule is implemented by two different teams. You have standards and practices, BES standards and practices, and BES UCR permitting. And they have different responsibilities, and the current rule isn't always clear as to who's doing what and when. So this rule is sort of divided those responsibilities out. So you'll see in the rule, sections 5 and 6 really speak to the responsibilities of standards and practices. And that really comes down to approving the product materials and approving contractors to demonstrate that they're qualified to install those products. They'll also look at any in-sale alternative requirements. And those submittals can happen at any time, but they do need to occur before permitting. So switching over to permitting, the remaining of the rule, which is sections 7 through 15, really speak to issuing permits and approval of permits. So it falls back to URC permitting. So a UR permit, a repair permit, is required for work that involves CIPP lining repairs. And part of that permitting process, Margaret's team is going to look at if that contractor has been approved, if the product has been approved by standards and practices, and if the contractor has been approved by standards and practices. And I think it's important to note how these rules work back and forth. Is UR permits are conditioned to meet the requirements of this rule, ENB-4.17. It's a standard condition. So the permitting of the UR is subject to 4.17 and ENB-4.33. Again, nothing really new here. The rule changes strive to provide clarity and predictability through better organization and providing more direct language that's less ambiguous, and then again removes redundancy. So we've tried to organize the rule to lump all the related policies. So everything related to video requirements is section 10, liner locate section 11, and so on and forth. So it talks about after construction, these are the documents that you need to provide to Margaret's to UCR permitting team, and then how they're going to look at that information and ultimately approve that UR permit. And that's going to wrap it up for ENB-4.33. If you have questions, we'll address them at the end of the presentation. We'll have plenty of time to do that. And the last rule we're going to talk about today is our enforcement rules, our administrative rules for our enforcement program. And the primary driver for this update was to correct a minor oversight that inadvertently excluded ENB-4.17, which we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. It excluded it from the applicability section. So the current rule has an applicability section that lists all the rules that are subject to it. And that one was inadvertently left off, but it's always been enforced under this rule, ENB-4.15. And since we needed to add that small change, we again took the opportunity to take care of a couple of targeted updates, which are nowhere near the magnitude of the other two rules we talked about. These are simply strikeout underlying changes in the rule. So ENB-4.15 is used to, it establishes the criteria that BES uses for evaluating violations, assessing penalties, and describes the overall enforcement processes, including the appeals. There were very minor changes to this rule. They were just targeted revisions to, again, update the applicability section of the rule. Definition's been added for responsible party. And there were some minor text inconsistencies throughout the rule, which have been cleaned up through this update. But the updates do not include any new policies, nor do they change or replace or remove existing policies, just a couple targeted revisions. And that's it. So public comment period. It started on November 1st. It's a 30-day required, but we're extending it to December 6th to account for the Thanksgiving holiday. You can find more information on the rules by going to the website here, portland.gov/BES/rule-updates. You can send comments to the email address here, which is BES code and rule. And you can email questions or clarifications to the same email. I'll take a look at them. My phone number's here, but when I put that on there, we're still teleworking. So by all means, give it a call. I do check messages. I can call you back, but it is faster and more efficient if you can just shoot me an email. And that concludes the presentation. I'll thank you all for tuning in, and we can open it up for questions.
Good job, Len.
Yep, good job.
I felt like I kept speeding up.
Did you want me to keep recording for questions or end the recording?
Eric, you have anything?
Eric, do you have any questions?
So no, I don't have any questions on my end. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I have two questions. Sorry. My first question was just to confirm that the review period is until the 6th, and then after that time, that's when the city would determine what they would or would not want to implement as any changes or potential changes to the rules. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And my other question is on the information I sent, was there any questions that anybody had for me on the multitude of info sent?
I honestly haven't had a chance to take a look at it, Eric. Being honest, I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Because I was going to say, other than what I sent, I don't know how well else I could articulate anything. So I don't really have anything to add in full transparency, not really being a technical person, but really just being able to gather all the materials and information that I think would be helpful to the city in reviewing the end seals versus what a suitable alternative may be, or if that's something that the city feels may or may not be feasible.
Okay. Sounds good. I don't have anything to add, everyone. And there's
Nope,
nobody
I don't.
else has joined, so
Well, I kind of have a question, Eric.
Sure.
So are you I can't tell if you like the idea or you don't. Are you representing a company that does have end seals? Or
Yeah, so that's a great question, and my fault for not clarifying. So basically what my role and who I work for is I'm the Western Regional Sales Manager, basically just a sales guy for Waterline Renewal Technologies. Waterline Renewal Technologies is the parent company for LMK. LMK is the manufacturer of the end seals, the Insignia end seals. And what I was trying to put forth was the idea that in essence, there is no suitable alternative to the end seals. And that's why there is that rule and stipulation there that there is not a competitive technology. And if the goal is to truly mitigate inflow and end your space for roots, besides having the ability of a one-piece hydrophilic seal that can swell 800%, since the resin will shrink, you will have space and you will have inflow without those seals.
got it.
Caulk, grout, alternatives from our maybe biased opinion are not acceptable.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry for not being clear in my email.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like Glenn. I've just been clobbered today, and I apologize. I will get to it though, and we'll get your response.
Thank you. No, that's much appreciated. And you know what? Just appreciate the time and the consideration.
Thanks for participating, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is neat. I actually learned a lot. I'm not a technical person, like I said, and I come from outside the industry. I've worked for Waterline and LMK for a year, so this was kind of cool to sit on this meeting. I've sat on plenty of other city meetings for a variety of other past lives that I've lived and done. So this was really cool.
Cool, I appreciate it. So just to reiterate, so I haven't looked at all the attachments. I'm not sure if there's a letter that stated your comment as you just did, but to sum it up, the general concern or comment is that the folks you represent, you don't feel that there is an alternative that is equivalent to the end seals?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. All right,
I'm going to stop the recording now.
sounds good. Thanks, Ivy.